First of all, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. So welcome Linda, Christoph, Busra, Anil, and Amber. For those of you that are joining us for the first time for the Lunch and Learn, or who might not be very familiar with CoControl. CoControl, we are a freelancer marketplace. We have a community of over 700 top tech freelancers in the fields of software development, product management, UI, UX design. And this virtual Lunch and Learn is essentially an opportunity for members of our community, as well as invited guests to share their knowledge and to exchange with their peers in tech freelancing. So today, I'm very happy to welcome Bertrand Rothen and Levi Dietrich for an awesome talk on debunking the full-time equivalent myth and making product teams aware of freelancers' benefits. It's very cool to have this topic. I think particularly for those of you in the call who are freelance product managers, you're probably looking for some great tips. And so I'm happy to pass it over to Belt and Levi.
Yes, thanks very much for the intro, Logan. Thanks, of course, everyone else for joining. For those who haven't been on since 12 sharp, I was mentioning earlier that we feel very, very humbled that you would, take the time out of your lunch, which I'm always very reluctant to do. I only do this on very special occasions to take time off, lunch to look at a webinar. So we're really humbled that you're here. And just because also this is lunchtime, and we hope to not make you even hangrier by throwing a bunch of facts at you and just kind of boring you. We kind of want to make this a little bit entertaining. And of course, we do want to add a little bit of value. We want to give you something that might be helpful to you. So we of course have a few things prepared in our slides, but we try to make this a little bit more fun. And of course, I think we have it set up in a way that we have the way to, I think, Logan, people can submit questions, right? Or submit them at the end. We're gonna have like a Q&A at the end. So if you do have something you want to follow up on, we'll definitely have the space to do that afterwards. To just kind of jump into the subject real quick, we of course we're gonna have to kind of plug ourselves a little bit. We have started this little thing we call freelance product managers because keyword optimization is key. So of course we talk about freelance product management on that blog that we have created. You can visit us on the via the links below. And my name is Bertrand Rothen, or Bert for short. I have been working in product since 2014. I decided to go freelance in 2019. And there's you can see there's a list of clients that I worked with in the past. Actually, I'm currently working with the KaDeWe Group. And I met Levi in 2019 and I guess I kind of did some convincing work and helping him to make the jump as well. So I'm going to hand over to him real quick to introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Levi. Warm welcome from my side as well. I'm pretty happy that you all joined. As Bertrand already mentioned, I'm also working in product. Started a little bit later, and there since 2017. Worked mainly in the B2C context for Engel & Völkers, where I started as a classic project manager, and that then became a product manager. It was a pretty wild journey. Later, I worked for bigger consulting companies, and since January last year, I'm freelance as well. And of course, Bertrand helped me a lot with getting started. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, awesome. As we said, we are all about, this is basically how we started amongst ourselves, and then just including more and more people is, of course, about sharing knowledge, because we feel like this field is really underrepresented, which is going to be a recurring theme, not only in this one, but everything that we publish, basically. Freelancing and product is definitely still really a niche. It is, I feel like it's picking up traction at this point, as is freelancing in general, which is great, but we kind of want to do extra advocacy around product management as a specific field. So jumping into this subject now, I would usually, if we had a large crowd, I would ask, like, raise your hands if you've seen these kinds of messages before, where I don't know, I've received these quite often. It's probably mostly like mass mailed ones where, you know, people ask me like, hey, you are a product manager, right? Like, we are actually looking for one, and how about you want to join the team? And sometimes people are being ambiguous about like whether it's a freelance or a full-time opportunity, like a full-time employee opportunity. And then of course I've kind of come to just asking up front, like, hey, is this actually, you know, are you considering freelancers? Are you working with freelancers, or are you looking for an FTE? And then sometimes it just kind of comes back with like, oh, sorry, yeah, no, we definitely need an employee. Like, freelance is definitely not in discussion. And you know, thanks. If you have someone to recommend, that's cool, but otherwise, thanks, bye. And that's just kind of I guess that's how 9 out of 10 of these conversations usually go, which we think is probably just not the right proportion. So as I've actually, I guess I've shared this one on LinkedIn, just try to kind of grab people's attention with this one. I don't want to say that everyone is like, you know, resembles that who has a hard requirement on wanting a full-time employee, product manager, but sometimes it does feel a little bit like they don't even want to engage the discussion. I know that sometimes the people that are asking this question are maybe not also enabled to sway this decision in a different direction. But of course, since these people are involved, we still try to create advocacy for this might also just give a good cue of understanding your problem better. And also, since I do know that we have, for instance, we have Logan, we have Amber on the call, you know how important it is, and that, you know, that how much value it adds to really just kind of dig into the problem and consult the client on the solution that they require, other than just kind of running with what they think they need. So just wanted to kind of also establish the point that with other disciplines like design and development, also, it's become pretty normal to include freelancers into the mix, into the team. But with products, it's really still kind of a very, very novelty kind of thing. So, but of course, we don't want to just kind of give only one side to the conversation. So we also just kind of want to point to in which cases it does make sense to have a full-time employee.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, at first, I really hope that there's some vodka in those cups, because otherwise it would be a really weird situation going on there with the toast.
Does anyone toast like with coffee or tea? Like, does anyone actually do this? I don't know. I love the stock picture. It's like,
yeah, just saw it. Nice. I just discovered this little detail. Awesome. Yeah, of course. So one problem that we observed over the last years is that getting FTEs is not always that easy. Because as a company, you're always searching for very talented, very focused guys and girls that work for your company and stay for longer. But to find those people isn't that easy anymore. And we discovered this during the last years. And especially in the meantime, you have this big delta where nobody is taking care of a product or working there, and everybody is going full stop. So it might be a solution to go with freelancers. But if you have a consistent project scope, talking about projects that last for a year or even longer, it definitely can make sense to have an FTE, because this person can get committed. He has other focuses in this time because it's longer. And especially if you have no end date, it definitely makes sense to have one person that is committed. However, this is not always the case, just mention it. It also is a good idea to have an FTE and someone who stays longer as a product manager, consultant, or freelance or employee in the game, is if you have a lot of SLAs, or if your whole topic is very niche. And yeah, in those cases, it does make sense to work with an FTE instead of a freelance.
But of course, we feel like there's also the other side to this, which is underrepresented in this conversation usually, which is that there's definitely cases in which it makes sense to bring in freelancers, or to have someone that you can bring in which I mean, we're gonna at this stage gonna list examples that we actually have worked with in the past ourselves, which is that, of course, I mean, I know this is a little bit boilerplate, but if you have extra work to accomplish, I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't have more work than they can actually do in a day? And of course, usually your internal resources are, you know, they're not, I mean, of course, there's situations in which they are bored and like don't have anything to do. But most of the time, at least in product, I've actually never seen people that were underloaded or like didn't have anything to do. That is not a real problem. It's rather the other way around. Then, of course, for some projects, like, you know, doing a redesign, doing a relaunch, maybe also doing like a fixed amount of maintenance. There's, you know, a couple of things that just have like a fixed time scope for which it also just doesn't make sense to hire someone full time, like on end. You know, because then as soon as that project concludes or topic concludes, that person's going to be bored, and you have to just find something else to do with them. Also, of course, an issue that I call organizational fatigue is this whole, we've always done it this way. I guess a lot of people have heard this before. It's like this resistance to change, resistance to actually question the way that things are being done and actually changing them. That is actually a big issue that sometimes you just can't really solve internally, because it's just kind of, you're in the hamster wheel, and there's no way of getting out of this, like from a mental perspective, I mean. And then, of course, there's pragmatic things, just such like, you know, people go on absences like sabbaticals or parental leave, or even I've actually had a case, I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit, with conflicting notice periods. And of course, there's also the case that goes more into consulting or coaching direction, which is that if you do feel like you have this case of organizational fatigue and you do require training, then it is very hard for on-staff talent to actually go through procuring training and administering that training themselves. That is just a pretty tall order for one person. So we'd like to just kind of elaborate a little bit on those cases that we've you know, shared a little bit of our experiences regarding those cases. So for the first one, Levi actually has some experience with that.
Yeah, exactly. So the case of parental leave and being like the interim product owner in this case is something I experienced last year in Berlin when I worked for Durst Express, which was pretty fun. But there were a lot of learnings here as well, because there is something very special to being the interim product manager or consultant or whatever role you are offering for your customer and clients. Is that the shift, that there's always a shift in your responsibilities, and also the time that you spend there might increase. So it is very difficult to plan this, and especially in those cases, companies tend, unfortunately, to put this role just on the table of another person. Like, hey, you're the product owner already of team A, couldn't you take care of team B as well? And actually, we also have these designs topics over there, could you handle them as well? This is a very bad idea for obvious reasons, because you lose focus, and you're putting definitely too much work on the table of one person, which can lead in burnout, and which is not that funny. However, we think that it is the responsibility of a company to offer their employees an easy way to have this break, because this break exists for a reason, and it is not it's not the task of the employee to find someone who can take off this task. So one solution here might be that companies build their own network with some freelancers that they are likely to work with, that they have some experiences with, and that can be contacted in those cases. Like, okay, we're having a parental leave in 1 or 2 months. Hey guys, does somebody of you have time to cover this? And by that, you make this whole process more easy, not only for the company, but also for the freelancers and the team that is working, like the product team in our cases, and for the person who leaves for parental leave for sure. And we think that this is something that should be included always and be taken care of.
Especially because, I mean, you can't really plan when a kid's due, right? I mean, you can approximate it, like you can know a little bit in advance. So there's a possibility to plan around it, but at the point where like this, like, you know, the call comes, it's just like there's no room for negotiations. They're like, oh well, can you still kind of like cover the next 2 weeks from the hospital or something? It's just not possible. And
maybe one more thing here while we're talking about this. If you're having like this shifting of responsibilities that I mentioned earlier, it also makes sense to have someone who is used to the situations. And I would say that freelancers have more experience in fast onboarding and getting on track than somebody who is maybe an employee and who is more likely to have this persistency in his jobs and consistency and doing the same thing. And if you have someone like this and you throw him into new situations like every day, could get tricky.
Exactly. When we've worked with a lot of very kind of short notice requirements of like, can you start next week? And then basically you have like 1 or 2 weeks to onboard or something, and you need to go and create value. And that's of course a very different requirement as to the regular onboarding of a full-time employee. Also kind of, I guess, something that, I can be, slideshow was a little bit going crazy there. Sorry about that. So one thing that of course seems a little bit more anticipable, but is actually also very kind of ad hoc short notice thing is conflicting notice periods. So I've experienced this with a client where they had a product manager exit the company after 5 years, and he was just looking to do something else. And then they were recruiting for a replacement. It took about 4 months, I think, for them to decide that the person was the right fit and to have them sign the contract and everything. And basically the exiting PM had their 3-month notice period and was going through that. And then by the time that basically the new a permanent employee was signed, the old one was already leaving. So, and then of course that new person also had another 3 months of notice period to go through. So if you have this kind of at a kind of a mismatch, you easily have 1 to maybe even like 4, 5, or 6 months of just no one there to do it. And to then bring someone in for that interim time to just kind of steer the train while it's running until the next person comes is actually an important application where this is usually also not someone you can just kind of throw over the fence to someone else, because that's really how you just kind of burn out your on-staff people. And of course, it's I mean, I'm just going to put aside real quick the moral and the human aspect of burning out people, which is, I mean, we can have a whole different discussion about that. But if you look at it from a business perspective, the cost of dealing with someone being burned out and replacing them is just way higher than just kind of bringing in extra people for a few months to bridge that gap. And is actually, I mean, from my perspective, it worked really well. Also because you're basically able to carry the staff for a while and then take it from one side and bring it to another one. And just this exercise of also transitioning the topic actually creates extra value, because you are just kind of detaching yourself a little bit from having these people on for like 5 years as the domain experts within the company that haven't documented anything anywhere. And it's always just like, oh, no one's written this down, but ask X about this. And then that person leaves and basically no one remembers anything. It just creates a different sort of discipline of writing things down and keeping things documented. That's a kind of an added benefit, which actually leads us to the topic of training and upskilling and introducing improvements in the organization.
Sure. So one very important thing here in doing upskilling, like little Spidey here, is that you always have to work with empathy. This is so important to us that we put it like 3 times on this slide. And what we mean by this is that if you're going to a client and a customer and you're talking about existing frameworks and ways to work or communicate, you always have to keep in mind that it is most of the time the result of a lot of sessions and meetings with stakeholders from everywhere and from different departments, and everybody talked about how to do this and that. And if you're going to tackle or improve these topics, you have to be very gentle, because otherwise it's not you don't have that much fun afterwards, believe me. The next thing is that some teams, and this is something that I discovered over like several clients, is that teams might have some open questions for specific topics. This might be OKR setting or prioritization, or you name it, doesn't matter. And they did not have the time to have this deep dive into this. And as a freelancer, you have the chance to add massive value here, because you can use your experiences that you collected at your previous projects and jobs to supercharge your work there and to help them improving those parts, like getting the missing knowledge and talking about problem zones that could be improved in the daily work. And a freelancer has often a more easy and flexible situation here, because he is like an external consultant, and he is better heard than somebody that works there for at least 10 years, something like that. It's not always fair, but it's often how it works, and this is a benefit for freelancers. Yes, the last thing that we would like to mention here, and this is something that also Bertrand had a lot of success with, is doing like this final reports, or like we call it Abschlussbericht, to use this very fancy German word.
Yeah, mein Herr. To be really German for a second, but XING really also managed to establish the Auftragsklärung, which now people also use internationally, right? So there you go.
always sounds fun, like international people like calling it Auftragsklärung. However, what we mean with the final report, or the Abschlussbericht, is that you can prepare something after your project ends, and just summarize the last weeks or months that you worked there, and offering some additional advices or tips, or something that you just discovered and that you wanted to highlight. And the cool thing here is you are adding additional value on the one hand, and you're creating this USP for yourself of the super caring freelancer. But the other very nice thing here is that you can use it for follow-up projects, like saying something like, hey, I discovered this and that, and I could help you with this, but maybe we can talk about this later. And by this, you're still again in contact with a new project. And I think this is a very cool thing to do.
For sure, yeah. I actually feel like you're giving recommendations for people to process after you leave, and this is also, of course, a great opportunity to kind of keep your name in the game locally, right, with the client. Exactly. Just kind of to kind of play something or to be remembered by. And actually, one thing that I also want to talk about is change management. I mean, I guess I have to kind of explain the image, which is that we were talking about the subject, like change management. To me, it sounds like very like just kind of dry, like stale textbook project management theory, like, you know, where you talk about doing change management processes and blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of imagined this being like these consultants that, you know, are just very kind of like buttoned up and looking super serious, and we are going to consult you in change management. And it kind of, I got this image, and I just said in one like sentence, like, I feel like this would be a really weird rap album cover for like, so we just added the parental advisory thing. But yeah, so with change management, I know, as I said, it sounds a little bit dry. But I feel like also change management is sort of a ubiquitous thing, that anything that you basically change on an organizational level is change management. But I've seen a lot of this happen, and also have furthered a lot of this, and seen also the necessity for this with a lot of clients. So this is something where I guess, I mean, in some instances, it's basically just that the product organization's underdeveloped. Like, I don't know, no one was really taking care of it, or there wasn't really the expertise to institutionalize it in a way that it would especially properly scale. If you add like more team members, of course, if there's one product person, it always works out. But if you have like a little bit more of a complex structure with multiple people involved, like how do they communicate, how do they also organize their work and everything, that's really useful to bring in people who actually have copious experience with other cases. And also even things where the basically product development or the software development used to be something that was separate from the core organization, and then in terms of like a digital transformation project, Another great one of those words are terms like digital transformation, change management. Is in kind of within one of those projects, you would take that kind of a software or a digital satellite and incorporate it into the core organization. And that, of course, is a larger example for a change management process. And so, of course, with these things, those are, I mean, they're usually kind of fixed scope. I mean, there's a part of that that's kind of permanent or ongoing, but a part of it is also just like fixed term work. And it's definitely also something that usually requires, I mean, and anyone would testify to this, requiring external help, because the reason why you are not there yet is integral and internal to your organization. So it's pretty much the definition of to further this, you need external help, not only because of needing like the impulse and the ideas for it, but also just to the capacity. And this brings me to kind of like the point at the bottom, which is talking to a lot of people talk about all these awesome ideas and all these like crazy new frameworks and blah blah blah, but executing on it, like actually having people work by those principles and actually improve their work, is a whole different deal. And that's sometimes just kind of where you need someone to get their hands dirty. And as you might know it in certain cases, that if you are an employee, if you're on a team, you feel that there's a certain a position that you need to uphold, and a kind of also a social construct that you have with your peers within the company. And sometimes you don't want to be the person who just kind of like kicks people in the ass and says like, come on, let's just do it. Like just, you don't want to be the narc kind of, or whatever, like the person that's kind of the party pooper or whatever, who just, insists on things getting done over being liked. And as an external person, as a contractor, as a freelancer, you of course, on the other hand, you're being brought in exactly for that reason, because you're impartial to these social constructs that exist within companies. I'm of course saying this completely neutrally, of course. I'm saying if you like these social constructs, or if you don't like them, that's completely your own deal. I'm just basically highlighting the fact that you are an external resource. And it is actually not discouraged, but rather encouraged that you use that to your advantage, or to the advantage of the client as well, to highlight these things. So we're actually almost done, but just before we kind of wrap it up, we just wanted to kind of give you an impulse about something that I know is consultative sales or consultative selling, which I feel like is probably a fairly established concept within especially tech sales, but that I found really, really helpful when I was at a company that was selling a product that is really, really hard to sell, and that is being connected to a mobile global ad exchange, where, I mean, that's just, it's not shoes, or it's not shampoo. It's really kind of hard to make graspable and explain. So what we basically trained the sales staff on back then was to really kind of take a more consultative approach, not just kind of throw them a bunch of slides like, oh, we have all these brands and clients and all these numbers and all this cool stuff, but rather to go and talk to them, understand their issue, understand also how we can actually mitigate this issue or help with this issue, how we can help them solve it. And as kind of like the most important thing, I guess at the bottom line is to give an honest answer. And in cases in which someone else had a great standing relationship with a competitor, we would just kind of ask, like, is there any way that we can entice you into working with us instead? If not, then just to shake hands and walk away. To just kind of understand or put the client's needs at the very top, and not your need to, I don't know, get a nice client on your list or to make a couple of bucks. So this is, of course, very important to also have people that you're talking to feel secure that they can make that decision purely based on what is actually best for their issue that they're trying to deal with, and not that you're kind of pressuring them into something. And this is something that we have actually had, to be very, very honest, not immediate success, but intermediate success with actually converting people from an initial kind of like, not sure if this is actually like, having freelancers, if that's a good idea for me, if that's of use to me, to actually converting that into a client. So of course, a part of this is also to just engage in the conversation, demonstrate your value by listening really well, understanding really well, and proposing good ideas. And then later, even if it doesn't work out in that specific moment, that just kind of just to place the idea basically with them, kind of like, I kind of always imagine this a little bit like Inception, like the movie, right? With this like, just this initial idea that's being placed and that this kind of unfolds over time. And that will basically then at some point translate into just breaking this this urban myth or a scene myth of being, you know, needing a full-time employee in cases in which a freelancer might do just as well or even better for that specific purpose. So I don't know if I guess putting a URL on a slide is sort of stupid, but I just did it anyway. I'm sorry. I guess we can kind of share this link somewhere or whatever, or you can probably just kind of Google it. I don't know. It's definitely helpful to read through, especially if you're a product manager or someone who doesn't work in sales, because it also just understands how the money is made, and also it might help you to just further your own business actually. So with that, we just kind of like to wrap up our part and then kind of go into Q&A. And so first of all, of course, as I just mentioned, consultative selling is a really great kind of just impulse giver to how you should run a conversation around someone being especially initially resistant to the idea of working with a freelancer. Understand their cases, understand how, given what a freelancer is and what they offer, how they could actually help in that situation. And then, of course, it's always good to offer solutions instead of just kind of, especially solutions that are semantically relevant to what the client just described, instead of just kind of trying to basically use a hammer for everything.
Exactly. And I think like we already mentioned, you should always try to combine all those points already mentioned with your experience. So it's always a good idea to add context and value through sharing it, and use the situation that you faced and that you succeeded with in the past to show the potential client and customers like how you can add value and how you can help them. And yeah, I think you should always do this after you have done this consultative selling, and also I highly prefer this jobs to be done framework here.
And then, of course, as kind of just a last kind of takeaway, just the goal here is being top of mind. So I've actually experienced this a lot there, where I had conversations where I eventually went into these conversations not worried about like, am I going to be able to convert this person like in kind of in an aggressive way of like trying to generate business, but rather to take learnings from myself, to actually also practice certain things, practice certain approaches of how to understand a potential client's problem, and also just kind of trying to learn on how within these conversations I'm able to deliver value to that specific conversation, even if it's just basically talking to a founder or a CTO or something for 30 to 60 minutes, and just kind of giving them something where they're like, oh yeah, that's actually a good idea. That's actually helpful. Like, I'm going to take a closer look at that, and it's probably going to be useful to me, just as maybe if it's just a detail, but at least kind of just placing that with them, so that even if they don't need you right now, even if they actually need something else, that if they do need you, they know where to find you. And this is actually, I mean, this can of course take a while until it goes full circle, but this is actually by this time, and I'm talking about 2 years, has actually worked out a couple of times for me already. So this is something I would definitely recommend if you have the kind of the longevity of sticking around until then. But I think, you know, it's fair in most cases. So. Yeah, so with that said, we would like to thank you very, very much for listening to our shtick about the debunking the myth of full-time employee necessity within product management. I hope this was at least, you know, worth your while as to delay, or, you know, to eat your lunch in front of your computer. I don't know what you did for lunch. I of course have to eat later. That's fine. And yeah, I guess we can open the room to questions now.
Yes, so if anyone's interested to ask a question, just feel free to unmute and ask away.
Just to preempt something, I'm actually standing right now. Yes, I'm not sitting. That's why I'm moving back and forth all the time. I sometimes like to actually use the countertop of this dishwasher as a desk. It's actually pretty good. And this is a fridge, yes.
Actually, maybe I'll
That's,
start. I have a question.
sure, go ahead.
How do you kind of like get yourself on the radar of companies? Or like, for example, let's say you come across, like you give that example of someone that was looking for like a full-time employee. What kind of strategies do you have to get yourself on the radar of companies that maybe aren't so used to working with freelancers, or are maybe open to the idea but don't really have much information on it, for example?
That's a very good question. And I guess part of our answer is start a blog around freelance product management. I guess I actually, Levi and me have been throwing this topic around a lot, and of course we do want to create that additional awareness. I think a lot of it goes down to, as Alan Weiss actually put it in his $1 Million Consulting book, is finding the true buyer. That's important. And one thing I guess that we learned going into freelancing, especially in that field, is that HR is usually completely out of the loop of this. Like, actually, I think with every client I've worked with so far, HR was never involved. Like, not at all. It is the decision that goes between procurement and any department head that is eligible or required to make that decision. So that alone is actually something where I feel like maybe there's also a paradigm shift that is necessary, and that might even happen soon, that HR is involved in this question. I understand why semantically they haven't been involved so far, because employees are thought of as people, and freelancers are thought of as a service, right? So it makes sense to kind of treat them differently from a procurement perspective. But this subject of being able to react quickly to things that happen in the real world is just something that I think will urge companies to involve their HR department a little bit more. So I think to answer you, or to give another answer to your question, to me, it's mostly been reaching out to people and developing an organic connection that relies on actual like knowledge transfer and establishing yourself as a domain expert. So that's been the most useful, just kind of being there, being on people's radars on, for instance, like LinkedIn, or also on XING, and other networks that where you would find those people. I mean, I guess Twitter would otherwise be a good reference point. But yeah, and of course also understanding what your specific in or niche is. So I mean, I know that people, especially at the start, would like to kind of just be kind of as broad, perceived as broadly applicable as possible, but that usually doesn't really work in your favor. For instance, I've actually mostly encountered the difference between doing product management in e-commerce and not e-commerce. Like that's usually kind of a like e-commerce clients usually want someone that has worked with e-commerce before. So that is an example. So if you don't have any e-commerce experience, I actually at some point I just decided to not actively pursue these things anymore, unless I felt like it made sense. So yeah, that's one thing. Just kind of know your space, know where you have like the best kind of credentials for, and then go try to be narrow at the beginning, maybe a little bit more.
Great, thank you so much.
And I guess the rest is just a lot of conversation around like just questioning like, why don't you work with freelancers? And I don't know, Levi, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think you covered it pretty well. So I think just one thing I would like to highlight is that it's the most important thing to go out there and like make some noise, like talk about these things that you believe in, and like we are trying to do, more or less, like sharing our experience. And I think just get in contact with the persons that you are interested in business-wise, and same for the companies, and try to find like your own network.
And just to be real at this point, in case someone's thinking like, oh, well, you know, just another couple of dudes talking about like, oh, like, you just got to do it. Like, we did this thing, right? It actually took us quite a while. We were talking about this idea for like almost a year until we just basically got fed up with having a grand design. Just said, you know, screw it. We're just gonna start putting that blog out because we're just so like, you know, like getting antsy about it, and just like thought we have all these things lying around. Like, I guess there were even a few posts that we just had to delete because they were not current anymore because we wrote them before Corona even started. Like, stuff like that. So
it's a process, right? Like everything we do.
So we acknowledge how hard it sometimes is to just kind of kick something off, but on the other side of things, it's like, you know, you can only say it's worth it. So
awesome. Cool. So for our other participants, Amber, Busra, Christoph, Linda, any questions for Bert and Levi? Just make sure to unmute yourself in case you forget. No?
Also, yes, it's 18 degrees here. Just answering questions no one asked, you know. Me.
Okay, maybe one more follow-up question for me then. So what would you say are some important ways that you want to present yourself online or present your portfolio? So for example, obviously I would say, you know, having an up-to-date LinkedIn with your experiences, maybe having like a website, and of course you guys are doing the blog. Is there any other ways that you can go about to generate, you know, interest in potential clients or about your work, or to show off maybe the work that you've done before? Anything else that you would recommend for people to do?
I guess this is also something we've talked about quite a bit. I don't know, Levi, if you want to share something that you had, like thoughts, like recent thoughts on this.
It's like I'm going to repeat myself, to be honest. I think it's the most important thing is like to talk about what you do, like what have you successful achieved during in your employment if you haven't been a freelancer before, and just start talking about it. What I did earlier, like before I started, is I called like everyone I knew from my network, and it sounds like easy, but this was kind of hard, like to reach out to them and to talk, hey, I have this idea, I want to do this and that. But this helps a lot, because if you contact them and you ask them maybe even for help or just to validate your own idea and plans, you're making like this kind of noise that something is happening, and most of the people are going to help you somehow, and by that everything is going to develop very naturally and organic. I mean, you still have to put in the work and to have the grind, but at the end it's just always the same, like doing good work and talk about it, from my point of view.
Well, I think what I would also want to add at this point is I actually one time I worked for someone who was they were, you know, vice president product management, and that person basically had a plan of when addressing a big launch, they would write a press release. Kind of, that was the first thing, and basically reverse engineer the whole thing from there. And of course, I thought this was a kind of a novel approach, and I know it's not like start from scratch, but actually kind of just design where you want to stand when you're done, and then just kind of work your way from there. Like, what do you want to have in that press release? You know, what should be in there, and just kind of work backwards from there. And that to me has actually served really well in just kind of taking this outside perspective of like, not, you know, just not looking from your own vantage point, but actually looking from everywhere else onto you, or looking if you are anywhere else, to be able to even see you or notice you, right? So if you would reverse engineer this, the other way around would be like, if you need a great UX designer or developer or product manager, what would you do? And what would others do that you would find, you know, as a credible or valid way to procure someone in finding that person? Like, what steps would you take? What places would you look in, and everything? And then of course reverse engineer that into how should you present yourself to meet that criteria, right? And of course, this is not something that you do once, it's something you do all the time and continuously, right? But of course, so for me, I wouldn't say this is the right way to go. Like, I mean, some people say I don't have a website. Actually, I mean, from a legal perspective in Germany, it's actually advisable to have your own website as a freelancer, but that's a different topic. But if someone says like, I don't have a, a really well upkept website, I don't have a LinkedIn profile, I just have a great network of people and they just call me and whatever, that's fair. I'm not going to tell you to do things differently. I'm just going to say for me, as an example, I would want to be someone who, for instance, turns up on Google searches or on LinkedIn searches or something, someone who's just kind of, in terms of visibility, creates this kind of, this kind of, well, this kind of just baseline visibility that and that basically people feel like or know that they can reach me through all kinds of ways and they can easily reach out to me. That is something that I want to set forth. And if you don't want that for yourself, then that's fair. But then my question would be, why don't you want it? So I think there's valid reasons, for instance, to not have LinkedIn or not to be active in communities or whatever. But I think that you should always owe yourself to ask yourself why. And of course, also questioning these individual, and I think that's also something that we went through that we could also probably branch this out into a whole different topic, is like what channels work best and what actually I'm already writing a blog post about this, so whatever. But but actually, yeah, I've actually we've gone back and forth also because Levi was sharing with me this whole thing about his experience of reaching out to the inner network, which is feels like a like kind of general knowledge, but it is actually, if you look at what options you have and how those validate themselves for us especially, and then of course for the general freelancer population, I think this is a really, really important and a subject that just kind of always comes up again and again. And on that note, of course, I have to say, and I'm not saying this because I'm obligated to, but because I actually believe it, is that Co-Control is a great example for a community, for people to get together. Because you are, and this is something I've experienced from the start, you're very driven around the craft. You don't give to me the impressions as that you're just trying to make money. You're there to bring people together and to actually create synergy from that community. And you're doing it in a way that the community is not too small, as in that it's not relevant, but it's also not too big, like a portfolio of an institutional recruiter that basically just has, I don't know, a huge Rolodex of people that they're just pick out at random, more or less. So I think you're taking a great approach, and I like these more kind of community-driven approaches, not just because I like them personally, but because I think that's how you're going to win in the end. Like, I honestly believe that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. It's really something that, basically my role and my team within Co-Control was created to ensure that, of course, our main value proposition is to connect freelancers with, vetted projects from great clients. But on top of that, we really try to foster this atmosphere of collaboration, sharing. Sometimes people will come in and be like, hey, like, I am stuck on this technical issue, and people are more than happy to jump in and support. The whole point of this format, the virtual lunch and learn, for example, is to share, have like this kind of peer exchange forum for people to share insights, ideas, whether it's like technical topics or maybe more general freelancing topics. So yeah, it's really great to hear that from you, Brett. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I feel like at the beginning I went out to a lot of communities, recruiters, and I mean, Levi did as well. Like we both did, just because I think at the start it makes sense, just because things are gonna organically kind of pan out or not. And I think it's something that there's no one thing that kind of recurringly. For instance, I don't think there's a one-stop shop. Like I just don't believe in that. Like there's just only one place. I mean, if there were, that would be nice, but I just think, and it's not something that you can rely on just one single source of business. Yeah. But of course, there's always a list. Like there's a tier, right? There's like my number one source, my number two, my number three, and everything, right? And it's more about like what is in your top five, right? And that's kind of where you want to be, especially as a community or as a contact or. So acknowledging that, I think, yeah, it's about kind of just creating also what you said, like this basically this two-way street where, you know, it's not just kind of the one-sided relationship. It's about people just kind of contribute, and at the same time they gain something from it, which just serves for more opportunity of someone just kind of saying, hey, I know this one guy would be perfect for this, you know, like, let me connect you guys. Like,
very good. So I think we maybe have time for like one last quick question if any of our remaining guests want to jump in. If not,
I think everyone's hangry.
Yeah, sure. So with that said, maybe we'll close it here for today. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join today. It was really great to hear your insights. And I'm very excited to share the recording widely with our community and the public. I'm sure they'll get a lot of value out of this. And yeah, I guess we will be in touch. And I wish everyone a great rest of your day and hopefully see you again next time.
Yes, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
And I guess for final words, I'm going to hand this over to Levi.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very fun to share our insights with you, and we would love to do this again. So yeah. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining.
Cool. All right. Ciao, everyone.
See you soon.
Thanks, both.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
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 Thanks all for listening. Take care.